Hey everyone, Hazz here. Today I'll be showing you another one of the buffs that I've created. Today we're doing Moon Knight. So just to keep in mind, base all these stats that you see of a 565 champion, not a 6-star rank 3 or a 6-star rank 4. So first of all, we'll look at his passive abilities. I've made him immune to ability accuracy reduction. This is really helpful for a lot of different nodes or champions that may reduce your ability accuracy, which can actually heavily influence his damage output and utility. However, he's immune to all that, so that really helps him keep a really consistent amount of damage utility in all different matchups. And also, to add to that, whenever his ability accuracy is attempted to be reduced, he'll actually gain some power back, which is really nice. So now we'll move on to his main mechanic, which is his moon phases. So as you all know, Moon Knight currently changes his moon phases based on the actual moon phase in real life. However, this isn't really ideal for a game like this because sometimes you want different effects, and obviously you can't really change the moon phase. So you got to kind of wait. You got to wait a few days for the different moon phase that you want, and I really don't like the mechanic. I like the idea and the concept of having him base around the moon, but I don't like the fact that you have to wait that long to get the one that you want. So I've actually just come up with a pre-fight ability instead, because this way you can choose any sort of utility you want, but still have that kind of moon element to it, which I really like. So first of all, we've got Full Moon. It gives you a passive fury, increasing attack rating by 1500. This is approximately 50% of his base attack. It might be closer to 40 or 60%, not 100% sure in his current base attack, but I'm aiming for around about 50% of his base attack. And all medium attacks have a 40% chance to inflict bleed. So this bleed will probably be equivalent to the critical hit bleed, which we'll explain later. And then also all his light attacks have a 15% chance to stun the opponent for 1 second. So this is probably it's his damage one, along with the next one we're going to read. But this is where he's going to get most of his damage. So next one we've got New Moon. He has guaranteed critical hits on all his heavy and special attacks. So that means that you're able to get that really consistent damage in just by spamming specials, getting all guaranteed crits, which is what a lot of skill champs do these days. And then also, when a crit is performed, he'll actually increase crit damage by a little bit each time. Now you can think of this mechanic similar to like Aegon or Shang-Chi, where whenever they do a crit, they'll just do better crits in the future, pretty much. And then also, his heavy attacks will refresh the duration of all bleed debuffs. So what that means is, if you have bleeds from critical hits, or if you have bleeds from the full moon, we'll talk about how you can activate different phases during the fight later, but if you have multiple bleeds, you just use a heavy, you refresh all of them, and they keep ticking down. That's really nice, just for damage. Now we'll look at the two utility moon phases, which is Waning and Waxing Crescent. So the Waning Crescent, he'll purify 1 debuff every 5 seconds. So you can kind of think this a bit like the Masochism node, where it'll purify debuff every 7 seconds. This is just every 5 seconds. And he'll also get a passive precision, which will increase his crit rating by 1500. This is on all attacks, not just basics, not just special attacks. This is all attacks. Any attack he'll do, he'll have that passive crit rating by 1500. If you need a kind of reference point, because I often don't know how much is a lot of crit rating, how much is not very much. Consider Hercules. One of his precision buffs gives around about 2000 crit rating. And Hercules by himself has a really low base crit rating, so that just even one precision buff can make him crit a lot more. So having this be not quite as good as that one crit buff, but being decent, I would say, coupled with his not bad base crit rate, I believe it's pretty much about average, maybe a little bit, I think it's a bit below average. This means he's going to be critting a decent amount. He's going to be placing lots of bleeds, and yeah, it's kind of nice for damage, but it's mainly for that purify utility that you want. Next, we'll move on to the Waxing Crescent. This will make his basic attacks ignore evasion auto block. That's essentially true accuracy on his basic attacks. So mediums, lights, and heavies. That's really useful. Consider that to be a little bit like Mormans, a little bit like Nulls, stuff like that. They have passive true accuracy on their attacks, except for Null, it's only his mediums. And then also, Moon Knight's special attacks gain true damage. So that means they ignore armor resistances, which is quite useful. It's not as useful as true accuracy, but it's still quite nice to have to kind of do a bit more damage. And he also places an indefinite debilitate debuff, which will decrease debuff duration by 35%. Sorry, it would increase debuff duration by 35%. So what that means is if you place bleeds, they'll last longer. If you place stuns, or any other debuff from nodes and such, it will increase all that by 35%, which is pretty nice. It gives him definitely a bit of a damage bonus, but also a bit of utility as well, because if you have that little bit of extra duration in your stun, you can kind of go for, I imagine, another maybe light hit or so, maybe another combo in, if you can time it right. Now look at critical hits. He has a 50% chance to bleed over 5 seconds, which deals 4,000 damage. Again, I'm still working out the numbers on this, but I think that's about what I want it to be. So, about half of your crits will inflict a bleed. And also, there's a second little point here where if the bleed fails due to an immunity, or if the bleed is purified, you instead inflict a passive crit bleed, which will scale with his crit damage rating. This scales with the crit damage you get from New Moon as well, which is nice. And also, it'll scale with the special 2 crit damage rating as well if you happen to bleed off your special 2, which we'll talk about later as well. Now, some people might be thinking, oh, if it fails due to an immunity, why would it just place another bleed? And you're absolutely right. Like, if they're immune to bleed, then a passive bleed isn't going to solve the problem. But this is mainly for debuff immune nodes, not really bleed immune champions. I'm not making him, bypass bleed immunity. I'm making him bypass debuff immunity with this ability. And then obviously purify as well. Next, we got on his second medium attack, he's going to pause all bleed debuffs for 1.5 seconds. If you couple this with the new moon phase where you can refresh the debuffs, you can just spam medium, and then go for a heavy. And then you can refresh and pause all your debuffs, or your bleed debuffs constantly. And that's really nice because it means that you can keep that consistent bleed damage over time going. Now, as you can see, his bleeds are not the strongest, but again, you can stack these and keep refreshing them with that. And your crit damage will just keep going up and up and up, and you get the guaranteed crits in New Moon as well. So New Moon is really good for some consistent damage, as I stated earlier. When he finishes a combo with light attack, this is one of my favorite mechanics about his buff that I made, is when it's thrown into block, he's actually going to break through the block. So essentially he gets an unblockable 4th light attack. And then if he manages to break a block with this, he'll inflict a weakness debuff on himself for 3 seconds. Now, you're probably thinking that's a negative effect. Why is he going to inflict a weakness on himself? Now, it does decrease attack by 0, so it doesn't really do anything. The only thing it does do is it gives you free willpower healing if you run willpower, and it comes into effect with the next line I'm going to read here, where on special attacks, if he's suffering from any debuff, including the weakness debuff, his special attacks are unblockable. So what you can do is you can throw a combo into that block with light attack, break through that block, then dash back, wait for them to block themselves, to force block, then you just dash in. Because you have a weakness debuff on yourself, for 3 seconds you're able to throw a special and make it unblockable, and get a bunch of different effects based on which special you throw. But the main one, which I really like, is makes him really suicide friendly and really great against nodes like Thorns. So if he throws a special into block, he takes 100% less damage for the duration of the special attack. So what that means is any damage he would take from the special, or from the opponent during the special, is negated. This doesn't include damage over time, but it includes stuff like Thorns and Recoil, which is really nice. His special one, if it's thrown into block, again, like I said before, you can do that with the light attack. He will switch to the next moon phase. So what this means is it'll just go down in order. So you go to full moon. If you start in full moon, then you'll move down to new moon. So that's a really great way to kind of change up your utility, change up your damage. It's great for like lots of different type of matchups where you need to change your play style, or you need to change something to fit the matchup and fit how the fight is going, which is nice. One thing that is really good with this is that any effects from previous phases that are always active, so like the passive abilities, they'll carry over. So what do I mean by this? I mean, if you start in full moon and then you switch to the new moon using the special one, you'll keep the passive fury. You won't get the bleed or the stun, but you'll keep that passive fury. Similarly, if you switch to waning crescent, you'll gain the guaranteed crits on heavy attacks and special attacks, but you don't get the crit damage or the heavy attack refresh anymore. Similarly, waxing crescent from waning crescent, you don't get the purify, but you get the passive precision, which is nice. Then with the waxing crescent, you will continue to you get the passive debilitate debuff. So essentially you get all the damage type functions rather than the utility or other functions. That's pretty much what you're doing. You're building up that. So wherever it says indefinite or passive, that's pretty much what you're going to be carrying over. So that's really nice. Now we'll move on to his special 2. It receives 2000 crit damage rating. It's quite nice. It's not amazing. It's not horrible. It's pretty good though, especially when you got guaranteed crits or like the Fury. You can kind of stack those. And then also, if it breaks through block, it's doubled. So you can break through block, guaranteed crits, get the Fury going, and you can deal some pretty nice damage with that special 2. Special 3, he will inflict a bleed for each bleed debuff that has already been applied. This is kind of like Killmonger's if you think about the way his bleeds work on a special 3, except this is max 15 stacks. The thing about this, which is better than Killmonger's, is that you can activate it multiple times during the fight. Whereas Killmonger, you can usually only activate it once unless you have synergies, then I believe you can get it a second time. But this, you can apply it however many times you need to finish out the fight. It's really great for damage. So I would definitely consider this in like longer fights, where your special 2, maybe won't do the job as quickly as the special 3 will. But I'd say in most short fights, special 2 is the way to go. In more longer fights, then I would say special 3. Now looking at his SIG ability, Khonshu's Guidance. This is a SIG ability that I think he doesn't need, but it's really nice to have in lots of different scenarios. So he gains a persistent charge whenever he wins a fight. So it gives him a persistent charge ability whenever he wins a fight. And this allows him to activate a second moon phase for the next fight. So essentially, this means you can activate 2 moon phases in a single fight without using the special 1. Because you don't change moon phase, you just add another moon phase. So what do I mean by this? If you activate full moon and new moon, you get both the effects. So you get the passive fury, you get the critical, you get the guaranteed crits, you get the increased crit damage, you get the bleed chance, the stun chance, and you get to refresh all the bleed debuffs. You can do this for any combination of 2. However, I kind of recommend doing full and new moon, unless you're running suicides, then you might want to do waning and full moon. Or if you need to ignore evasion auto block, you can do waxing and waning, for example, or a combination of any of them. However, this cannot be gained if the previous fight granted one. So you can use it basically once every 2 fights, which is pretty nice. And you can kind of save this up for the boss as well. So when the boss fight comes, you can just use both of your pre-fight abilities and activate 2. However, they don't stack, so you can only activate a maximum of 2. The one downside with this is that if you decide to have 2 pre-fights, 2 moon phases, then you're unable to switch it with your special 1. You can't switch it, you have to keep that for the rest of the fight. That's kind of annoying, but at the same time you can kind of choose 2, and usually that will survive, or that'll be sufficient enough for the entire fight for what it needs. Because usually it's mainly only 1 or 2 utilities that you need. And also he just gains a base ability accuracy bonus as well, 10 to 20%. So he doesn't really need SIG stones, because that's not the main part of his SIG. This is the main part of his SIG, which doesn't require SIG stones. But having a 20% increase in ability accuracy is really nice for a couple of different reasons. Like you get extra bleed chance, right? A little bit extra stun chance. You get extra chance to bleed in your critical hits. So it can be quite nice, but again, it's not necessary to have him high SIG. So let me know what you guys think of this buff. I really like this buff, especially with the combat light attack and then the reduction of thorns and recoil. Next, I'll probably be doing Green Goblin, so stay tuned for that. Probably release it over the next couple of days. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.